I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the urban myth section of the lore breakdown. The last view was basically on the training wheels. And in this, they're starting to come off. Next, we have the Scorched Girl. Another returning abnormality here. She looks like a little girl who was burned as a witch, and it didn't kill her. In the Lobotomy Corporation lore section involving her, I said that she had an affinity with fire, and yet the fire had no harmful effects, and could not be extinguished. Not even Snow Queen could put out her flame. All due to a match that had impaled her. She represented shattered hope and a desire for affection. Well, in the Lobotomy Corporation, she targeted a random employee and then exploded with fire when she reached them, unless she was defeated first. Not that this was hard, as she was physically weak and was slower than the pacing of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. As for how different she is this time around, we'll be getting to that. The Scorched Girl is preoccupied with the light from the fire, and hints at her being a twisted version of the Little Match Girl from a story by Hans Christian Andersen. Yeah, that Danish author will get around, believe me. This abnormality should have been in the story themed section instead, shouldn't she? Where she was in a place where she found herself in a house with a warm fireplace with large amounts of food and decorations. Yeah, it's set around Christmas. As long as the match was lit. When the match went out, she was in a cold place once more. Oh yes, and when the fourth match flame is killed, and that's a minion of hers, she loses hope and then decides to try and take the ones that took her hope away with her, desiring them to burn. As for what Malkuth has to say about this, she was forced to fight her alone. She noticed that the Scorched Girl saw the matchstick as her only hope and felt sorry for her. A dangerous action when fighting her. The Scorched Girl stage is composed of a populated medieval town at night, with a stone tile floor. There are silhouettes of people seen in the background and in the building's windows. Are these shadows of the past? Upon victory, the history floor increases to level 2, and Malkuth gets a second librarian of her own, along with the power of the Scorched Girl. Much like the guest receptions, the abnormalities might be fairly simple at first, but over time it will get more complex, believe me. It will be. Anyway, let's move on. After the Scorched Girl was defeated by Malkuth, that made me feel uneasy. But it was necessary to expand her combat capabilities. Roland brought Malkuth some history books for her. He also remembered Angela saying that she earned her fleshy body, asking if she wasn't human before. Malkuth elaborated on that and basically said that she had her brain transplanted via surgery into a robot's body, and then had it put into a replacement organic body. Now, this display of the library's power impressed Roland, although common sense had no hold within the library, as Malkuth wasn't too happy about it, due to the circumstances. She then mentioned that it was her third try at life, with memories from the previous 2 times. Now this surprised Roland. She then more or less mentioned what caused her to die as a human the first time around. Roland didn't want the conversation to get too dark and helped Malkuth calm down. Yeah, he has some people's skills after all. Next we have the Hook Office. Now, there's a blurry line between a fixer office and a syndicate, at least as far as greed is concerned. The Hook Office is a prime example of this, as this fixer office consists of ex-syndicate folks. They might lack the discipline of a true fixer, but they've lost none of their ruthlessness and brutality, as they specialize in contract killings and messy executions that wouldn't be out of place in a Mortal Kombat game, even leaving them on display, hanging on hooks to leave a message to those that it applies to, on behalf of their clients, mostly in the back streets. A menacing conduct is how they do things, even after going legit. Here is the marketing ploy that their current boss created after they raided their fixer office as a syndicate within District 23. When they butchered those fixers like the produce of the local restaurants. And believe me, you'll find out how bad they are in the next section of this lore breakdown series. They then put them on display on the streets as if Halloween had come early. And then they said that they needed people like them. And here's the advertisement. Fixers from a former killer syndicate will tear things up for you. You can count on us. Well, at least they're honest. Can't really fault them for that. It's other things that I could probably fault them for. Just not the marketing ploy. I don't think I could imagine what the advertisements for food would be like. I mean, special pasta. Ugh, you do not want to know what that's made of, considering what the culture of Backstreet's 23 is like. Well, that's just based on the advertisement for the Hook office. Yeah, guess what kind of weapons they favour? Something curvy with a point at the end of it. It's as if Death himself, or herself, depending on what you're looking into, has come to teach them how to make death as slow and painful as possible. Sorry if I made that sound cheerful. It isn't.
Taein is a fixer of this office that went to Union Co., a workshop that deals with bionic weapons and equipment, which were considered reasonable by the standards of other kinds of weapons. They can also be replaced without risk of health problems like allergies, although there were some initial problems, such as cutting clothing, much to Naoki's irritation, and his own cheek. Due to frustration regarding his control issues. Seriously, had he not considered some training attachments so that the damage could be lessened? At least until he gained better control, which he eventually did. He had a casual attitude with his teammates, which would have been good if he wasn't a cold and arrogant.
His bionic sides aren't for show. Next we have McCullin, a fixer that looks like a Jason Voorhees knockoff. Like Taein, he was once with a syndicate, much like the others. He's also quite homicidal. Yeah. What do you expect from hired killers that specialized in making their targets their pants before killing them? Despite this, he's calm and baleful. According to him, syndicate work and fixer work blurred together, and that can also be quite common, along with other organizations recruiting those that demonstrate something useful, based on the relationships built through previous actions. He thought that the operator of their office had strange tastes, but it turned out that this operator was impressed by the way that they raided their office and torn apart their fixers. Well, he certainly appreciated their marketing ploy. McCullin used the blade of Voorhees, otherwise known as a large machete, wielded one-handed. He's probably much less disfigured than the mass-murdering serial killer. Finally, we have Naoki. She understood what equipment was considered proper. Well, she could be thoughtful and sometimes calm. Well, they need to be terrifying, not lose complete control over themselves. Although that doesn't mean that she's a pacifist. As if those exist in that city. She doesn't let anything get in the way of the kill. And the money that their ask brings. She understands that weapons need individuality. Weapons that have technology built into them. Some of them could even be confused for magic. Although she understands caution and the need to do research before buying a specific weapon. She believes in observing others, finding out where they buy their weapons, and get them from those workshops. She has clearly heard of the expression, buyer beware. That, and she has standards when it comes to weapons. She wields dual machetes that are wired to a backpack she carries. Seeing as they don't deal paralysis, they seem to either add a sonic or heat effect when they cut into the targets, as in the kind that's more likely to make a target bleed out. How did they start, you may ask? Well, as stated before, Tain, McCullin, and Naoki were part of a syndicate in District 23, which is in W Corp territory. They're the teleportation and transportation specialists. They offered their services to those that couldn't afford the prices of fixer offices and associations. They had friends with the Axe Gang and teamed up with them at times. They raided a few fixer offices, and after that, the operator of one of them was apparently so impressed, and it was a miracle that they were still alive, considering this syndicate's reputation. He offered them jobs. They accepted, although their methods didn't change. They still gave wherever they were sent an unscheduled carmine coating, and still hung their corpses like they were freshly butchered livestock. And surprisingly, the Axe Gang didn't see this as selling out. Yeah. Considering that they went from a syndicate to a legit. Normally that would be the case. Sometime after this, Tain, McCullin, and Naoki were discussing their most recent handiwork, which occurred the previous day, and about Tain's previously fitted bionic weapon, which was apparently a bit excessive even by their standards, as more were killed than necessary. They would only be paid for the kills that they were hired to make, not the ones that became collateral damage. It turned out that Naoki had lost control of herself, and McCullin had to calm her down. They had to remain low due to that, or rather they low. They reflected on where they came from, and what happened to result in them being part of a fixer office, due to their methods and conspicuous outfits. They were then called by their operator to deal with the library, so they, along with other Hook fixers, received the invitation and walked through the door to enter the library. Upon arrival, and I honestly don't know why he bothered with this, Tain attacked Angela as she greeted them. Thankfully, her body rendered his attack useless, and it was clear to them that she's not human, but an AI. The Hook Office fixers, blinded by the potential profits, fought the librarians, got defeated, and they added to the books within the library. After this battle, Roland and Angela talked about what Taein spoke of. And it turned out that in the past, intelligent and sapient beings that were far too close to passing for human, to the human's liking, were driven out of the city and into the outskirts. After that, the Artificial Intelligence Ethics Amendment was created to stop the creation of androids, those that could all too effectively fool humans into thinking that they're one of them. Machines with emotions and feelings were clearly considered a threat to humans, possibly hinting at what this war that resulted in the rule of the wings of the world that was mentioned in the Lobotomy Corporation was against these AI, largely out of fear that they might decide to wipe out the humans. Clearly, whoever created that law has seen the Terminator movies. This AI ethics amendment even extends to machine body replacements, such as that which the Brotherhood of Iron had done to themselves. Not even what they had could be confused for human, even though they had human brains in them. Well, at least that explains why the Separars looks like something that George Lucas would have said, whoever came out with that design needs to be fired. Now, that made Angela's creation dangerous to Lobotomy Corporation, as if it was truly safe in a city ruled over by the head. A wing that rose to the top, which had a level of paranoia that would rival the Stasi in what was East Germany. Well, considering that the Cogito experiments that led to their spy informing on the Lobotomy Corporation resulted in an arbiter and 2 claws, their precision instruments and blunt force objects, respectively, being sent to destroy them. Imagine what would have happened if they found out about Angela. Let us just say that Ian and any others with him would have had more to worry about than 1 arbiter and 2 claws. The head would have likely sent a whole squad of arbiters' claws. They might even sent... They might even have sent the reindeer, rhino, and rabbit teams, along with as many high-grade fixers as they can find. Well, it would have certainly been a larger response, as an AI would have been considered more serious, as far as threats were concerned. As for Ian, I don't think he was scared of making Angela. He was probably more scared of getting caught making Angela. Roland knew that as well, as after finding out that she had an electronic copy of Carmen's brain, although she didn't state it by name, he told her that she was unaware of how dangerous it would be for her outside, due to her being illegal and a priority target for the head. It was also revealed that the librarians are not exactly human, even though they're flesh and blood. She also mentioned that she repeated a play for what seemed like an eternity, which in reality was repeating her lines for what was 10 years outside, 10,000 years for everyone else, but a million years for her, due to time appearing to her as if it was 1% normal speed. And she was fully aware of all that happened.
Roland asked, who had the balls to make her? And give the head a one-fingered salute regarding their rules. Ooh, how little he knows. Carmen was the only one that stopped Ian from going too far, a lot of the time, and without her to restrain his more dangerous side, he took more extreme measures to finishing what she started. Elcor was the only one to escape from the head's enforcement, although with quite a few casualties. Then Angela made a speech regarding the birdcage she was in and her freedom from it. She appeared to confuse Roland for someone who actually gave a What about the Hook office, you may ask? Well, it collapsed, possibly due to unpaid taxes and rents. Either that or the fixers weren't paid due to the failure of those sent into the library. And whether they're thugs in the syndicate or fixers in an office, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. If you don't pay anything, even monkeys will move elsewhere for what they need. Although that won't be the last of them.
Roland then looked for Yesod on the floor of technological sciences. He found him, and Yesod greeted him formally. He gave Roland a cold and piercing stare, one different from Angela's. The reason for that wasn't because he wanted a fight. It was because Roland's tie was crooked. Let's recap on what Yesod was. He was Gabriel, another of the researchers of Lobotomy Corporation, when the founders were still around, or at least still in human bodies. After Elia's death by Cogito, he suggested new security measures to minimize that happening again to Ian, but the damage was done. The guilt manifested, and he kept scratching at himself, seeing rot in his flesh that wasn't there. It drove him insane. OCD going out of control. And then, sometime after, he became Yesod. He eventually overcame his trauma, based on the lack of a scarf in his third life. Yet he's still professional and cared about appearance and spoke his mind, no matter how offensive. He asked why Roland obeyed Angela's orders so meekly. Roland answered honestly that he didn't have much of a choice. Yet Yesod was another that didn't like Angela due to her crushing their hopes at the very last moment. A complicated situation. He's working as a librarian as part of a deal, and that the others are still asleep. Roland wasn't interested in sentimental stories, and Yesod wasn't interested in being social with Roland when he offered his hand to shake. Yesod then told Roland to collect books on technological sciences in the city, and then told him to leave as they were done for now. After that, Angela asked Roland why he follows her orders so meekly. Roland answered, it's because she'd kill him if he didn't. That and he couldn't leave, although he wasn't motivated by fear, and she understands that it wasn't a fear of death motivating him. Well, he wants to know about her past, and as a byproduct of collecting books to get the ultimate book, he'd get some fun experiences. He also doesn't have much for him outside, even if he could leave. He also wants to figure out something, hoping to find the answer inside the library. The irony was clear to Angela. Although she warned against any unwise action on his part. This mildly annoyed Roland, resulting in him asking what made her so sharp. Right. She warned him against prying into her past, threatening to make his limbs slowly melt if he does. He backs off, wisely. Although he does ask about the librarians, how they don't feel like real humans, but weren't artificial beings or full-body replacements. Angela then mentioned that both abnormalities and employees were thoroughly exploited in the facility that was once there, similar to her, originating from humans, taken advantage of and then discarded. Roland still saw them as exploited. Angela then went on to say that they were broken with unstable forms, barely able to maintain physical cohesion as it is. The one book is the key to freeing all of them, including Roland, due to Angela using the library's power to reconstruct his body. Suddenly, Roland's position doesn't sound too secure, does it? Well, next will be the urban myth lore breakdown. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!